if we think our kids are suffering from anxiety and there's like a whole spectrum, right? Like it may be kids who are just suffering from anxiety, maybe there's an anxiety disorder happening. I'm imagining like if this were me, like probably the first things I would want to do is like see what I can do to help my child myself. So what are the things that parents can do to help their kids just kind of on their own?
I think educating your kids about anxiety and what it does to their body. I think kids are not connected to how they're feeling and what they're thinking and how it's shutting them down. So having open conversations about things that make them anxious and having them identify in their body what that feels like so they can kind of, because sometimes your body will be your first indicator, like, oh, I'm having a hard time breathing, why is this? And then getting them to tune into what things make them anxious, and this is regardless of whether they have an anxiety disorder or they're just a sensitive or anxious person. Because if you can get your child to rattle off, like, I get nervous when I'm around new people, and I get nervous, when I have to eat new food, and kids don't get that emotional education and emotional intelligence typically in school. Maybe one day they will, but we can do that for our kids. That's a gift to, like, if you ask my daughter, you know, what are your anxiety triggers? She's 9, but she'll be like, well, I'm afraid to throw up and I'm afraid of like embarrassing myself. And she'll like list them off because she's been like trained to I be able to identify. So I think the first step is teaching what anxiety is, how it feels in their body, and what anxiety themes they have. And then the second step is I always personify anxiety. I think that's helpful, but it's not the approach that everybody likes, and that's okay. It's like finding what works for your child. But we always name our anxiety at my house, and so we externalize it. So it's not necessarily something they are, it's something that they're dealing with. So they're either training their anxiety to respond in a different way. Um, or depending on your child's personality style, I have some boys I work with in my therapy practice who like want to crush it, or they want to like just, they're a little more aggressive. And so it just is whatever works for your child. But teaching them to walk towards anxiety or towards their fears, um, instead of away from it, is really helpful, because the more you avoid, the more your anxiety or your fears will grow. And so teaching any child, regardless of anxiety disorder, that when you take small steps towards your fears, you become empowered and you learn how to kind of retrain your brain that it's all okay.
So you're normalizing it with this conversation, and you might maybe even share your own like places in your life where you've had anxieties and what it felt like in your own body or something like that.
Yeah, normalizing is really good, because if you don't have that communication aspect, your kids will, hide their anxiety and it'll go undercover, and it manifest in physical ways. And so normalizing it, sharing your own experiences, not in a confidant sort of way, but in a modeling sort of way, can be so helpful. I feel like tapping into what innately makes them feel better. Kids can kind of intuitively know what makes them feel better. Like my son, I would find him sandwiched in between his mattress. And I noticed eventually, like whenever he's, and sometimes anxiety will look like rage and anger, and that's another thing. It'll look like disruptive behavior. And so his
Mm,
anxiety looks like, it does not look like anxiety. It looks like anger. And
mm.
I will find him balled up somewhere, either like under the bean bag, or like in, when he was in between my mattress. That was a very clear eye-opening moment for me. I was like, he's wanting deep pressure. Like, he obviously, his body, his nervous system is so like dysregulated that he is looking for physical deep pressure. So I think that kids will, you want to look at, just observe their behavior. What are they doing when they're feeling anxious, like intuitively, to get what they need? And sometimes it is movement. It is for him, for sure, deep pressure and movement. And
Mhm.
for other kids, who are already getting a lot of physiological overwhelmness, they're already feeling like their heart is racing and they're feeling panicky. I know, like, I had panic attacks when I was a teenager, and exercise would be the worst thing for me, because I
Mm.
already felt like my heart was racing. And so any
Mm.
movement, and I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. So anything that would, accentuate that would definitely cause more anxiety. And so I actually needed to just have like an orange, which was so bizarre. I needed to have a cold orange. I needed to have like coldness on my face. So that became kind of my coping mechanism. So I think it's tapping into helping your child connect the dots of what do they need? What does their body need? I feel like there's two other things to mention. So one, It's validating it, which I know sounds kind of like a cheesy therapist thing to say, but I think all too often we're uncomfortable with our kids' feelings. And so we swoop in and we say, you're fine, and with good intention, honey, you're fine, or it's no big deal, or it's just blah, blah, blah. And what we're inadvertently doing is we're discounting their child's fears, and it doesn't feel fine in their body. It doesn't seem fine. And so we want to initially just sit with that, like, I know that's scary for you, or I know that feels really overwhelming for you. Or if you've named it, like we have in my house, be like, I know clouds were really upset by that. So acknowledging that. And that doesn't mean that we're going to accommodate it or tiptoe around it now because we've validated it. It's just, that's the first step, is sitting with that. And then kind of like swinging in the totally opposite direction from that advice is, I think sometimes we feel so, a lot of us who have born anxious kids or sensitive kids are sensitive ourselves. And so we can like almost physically feel our child's anxiety. And it can be almost unbearable, like on a physical level, even depending on how sensitive you are. And so it seems like the maternal instinct or the paternal instinct is to just fix it. So I might say, honey, you're fine, or I might be like, you're not fine and I'm not fine. Either way, the end result for some parents is to go in and fix it. So, oh, you're upset with that? Then let's just get rid of that. You don't like going to that class? Let's just not go to that class. Um, the dark scares you. Let me just go with you. You can't cut your food, I'll cut it for you. And we get gratification because our child's anxiety goes down in that moment, and so it feels very good.
Mhm.
But long term, it's actually not helpful because we really want to empower our kids. And so some of the counterintuitive parental approach is, after you validate it, like, I know that's really hard for you, let's find a tiny step that you can do to walk
Mm.
towards that a little bit. And so it may look like, and I'll give you an example. So when my daughter, I'm sure she probably doesn't appreciate this example, but I won't tell you which daughter, um, had a hard time, going to the bathroom. And part of that was because she used to get really constipated, so it hurt. But then, there were scares and fears around the toilet and the flushing, and bad guys are going to come out of the toilet, lots of stuff happening. But instead of me just saying, I know that's scary for you, and so I will always sit there and hold your hand. Like, we were at the point where I was on a stool when she was like 3, like
Mhm.
holding her hand as she was going through it. That's a lot. To, I'll stand in the door frame while you do it because I know that you can do it. I know it's scary, but I know you can do it. And then
Mhm.
I'm going to sit on the couch maybe, a few weeks after that because I know you can do it. So I think it's setting up these small steps of believing in our kids, even when they don't believe in themselves. And even when maybe privately we don't believe in them and we think, oh my gosh, they're going to just completely crumble, and give them a little small step towards that discomfort so they can learn how to build that resiliency.
I really appreciate that because I tend to be like, well, they gotta learn to do this thing on their own. So go do the thing sometimes, and those small steps, like just walking them through those small steps, that makes such a big difference. Like it sounds like that sounds very similar to, you know, sometimes we talk about in mindful parenting and like sleep. It's like, well, what's the middle path? Maybe you say to your child, like, I'm gonna be back and to check on you in 3 minutes. And then you go back and check in 3 minutes, right? Or I'm gonna go back and check on you in 5 minutes. And I'm gonna go back and check on you in 10 minutes, right? Like scaffolding
Yeah.
these steps, ways to kind of scaffold these steps so that we can just slowly, it's a like weaning, right? Like slowly wean them from your 100% full support for whatever that thing is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes we're afraid of our kids turning into a puddle. And so sometimes parents will say to me, well, Natasha, I've tried that. I've tried even the smallest step, and she crumbles on the floor and she cries and she screams. And so I can't do that. And it's like, don't gauge your success by your child's immediate response. Because sometimes when we cave in that moment, we're inadvertently conveying to our child that we believe that they don't have it either.
Mm.
That almost happened actually today. I've been trying to get my daughter, this is totally not anxiety related. I've been trying to get her to cut her waffle. She's 9. It's a little ridiculous. And we worked on it for like 2 months where she would just melt down. She had to cut her own waffle in the morning. And she, got independent. And then today, I can't do it. And normally it's because she's maybe overwhelmed already. She was anxious about going to school today, and so I could easily just jump in there and cut it for her. It would save me time. I wouldn't have to, she'd be happy, and it would seem like a win-win, but it's not. It's conveying a message to her that she really can't do it. And so
Yeah.
instead, we like literally, I held the fork as she took the knife and like, use it like a saw, go back and forth, and even though it seems ridiculous, it was like conveying to her that I believe you can do this. And she's crying as she's doing it. And I think that happens with anxiety too. Like they don't want to maybe take that one step where you're at the door or you're going to check back in 3 minutes. But even if they cry for the full 3 minutes that you are away, your behavior is conveying that you believe in them and that
Mhm.
they can do it and they will do it. And I think that's really tricky as a parent.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Janla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.